Hello and welcome to another anime lore and theory video. I'm Shergok, your host, and today we are going to take a closer look at what Nazarick even plans to do when it or its NPCs are attacked. But before we're going to take a closer look at any of this, let me quickly thank my Patreons for supporting this channel, as well as say thanks to all users of the YouTube thanks function for making one-time donations. And with that said, let's get to the topic at hand. The Great Tomb of Nazarick is, and was already in the days of Yggdrasil Online, an almost impregnable fortress, divided into 10 levels and a treasury vault. It was a labyrinth of twisted corridors and increasingly complex teleportation links that had all only one purpose: to increasingly divide the enemy, to gradually strip away their coherence and offensive capability, and therefore to exhaust them more and more. While wandering through the corridors of the Great Tomb, it was not uncommon for Nazarick's players to also teleport to isolated groups of enemies, which had already been brought to predetermined locations far from their main force, by teleportation traps for example, to engage them in one-on-one battles and defeat them, such as in the amphitheatrum on the 6th floor. And the first 3 floors consisted of cheaply made, identically looking corridors, which were not only very cost-effective to repair, and served as a wave breaker to defeat weaker raiders in a cost-efficient manner, but it also served to confuse the enemy, because everything looks the same. Larger raiding parties would normally be defeated on the 6th floor, because even if the strength of the 41 players was not enough, the spectator stands full of golems, along with Aura and Mara, would still be there to intervene with hordes of beasts and with AoE attacks meant to defeat entire enemy armies. The main force of Nazarick on the 8th level was also so strong that they were able to deal with the 1,500 strong raider groups during the largest attack on the Great Tomb. So the levels below are still untouched. And then the question now arises, with the Great Tomb being in the New World, what does a defensive concept look like, assuming that the threat situation is now different? And to start, Demiurge has already thought about this and developed and submitted plans for the defense of the Great Tomb. However, as Demiurge himself admitted, these have not yet been tested, something for which he apologized profusely to Ainz, who was also uncomfortable with the fact that he had not even read Demiurge's reports and was making stuff up. However, there was at least a basic test of the mechanics through the mini-raid back by the so-called workers in Volume 7. It has now been confirmed that the teleportation traps still work, that the corridors are so confusing that normal and even experienced former adventurer groups and raiders and workers and mercenaries have trouble orienting themselves, and that the many traps just on the first 3 floors are often enough to split the groups up, eliminate them, or to at least shatter their cohesion and break them up into smaller groups. And that this raid would fail was of course foreseeable, but it was necessary to ensure that the Great Tomb itself still functions after being transformed into something that is now real and tangible and not just a bunch of data in the New World, and that there are no readily available countermeasures. For example, something that would allow them to bypass the many traps of the Great Tomb with some kind of easily available tool or spell that most adventurers, most workers, and in fact most people would know. Again, after Shertir being mind-controlled, Ainz didn't want to be surprised again. And therefore allowing larger groups of raiders to at least attempt to force their way into the Great Tomb was a test to see if there could be this widespread method to bypass the teleportation traps or to otherwise navigate the twisted corridors of Nazarick more easily. And this brings us to Ainz greatest concern. They were apparently at war with a mysterious group of players, or possibly an entire guild. After Shertir was mind-controlled by a world-class item, Ainz didn't want to be caught unprepared again. It was, to a certain extent, the carelessness of Shell the Bloodfallen and Ein Soul Gone himself, who had not yet deployed or developed any countermeasures or security routines that were specifically aimed at countering world items or other players and raiding guild parties, and that left them very vulnerable and unable to respond appropriately if they encounter another world-class item user or other players again. And this was particularly significant because in the world there are also dragons and their original form of magic, wild magic, which works in much the same way than the world-class items from Nazarick and can produce similarly extraordinary effects. For example, the world-separating barrier of Riku Aganea or other Platinum Dragonlord could also have been an incredible problem for any floor guardian, simply because they couldn't leave. And maybe perhaps Platinum, after Riku Aganea, aka his armor, had been defeated, would have bothered to bring his actual body to the fight, in order to, for example, defeat Mare or Aura. Therefore, the fight against Shelty was a much-needed wake-up call, though it cost Ainz significant mental effort and used one of only 3 free uses of the spell Wish Upon a Star, which otherwise would cost experience or levels in Ein Soul Gone's case. It led to a fundamental tightening and improvement of Nazarick's security concept and doctrine, because now there are actual countermeasures in place in order to deal with another mind control attempt or any new world-class users encountered. As mentioned earlier, it was only after Ein Soul Gone captured Zeshi Zetsumai that they learned what actually happened to Sheltier and who had mind controlled her. Before that, it was a vague, elusive threat, a threat involving a world-class item targeting Nazarick. And even though the threat from world-class item users has now been identified and they know who was behind the attempt, there's still the risk posed by Riku Aganea, someone who can use the equivalent of world item magic, his wild magic, and it was only countered by Albedo's world item, Ginun Gargeb, which had been transformed into Albedo's Berdish, but the threat still remains. Therefore, security measures are still as relevant as ever, and that brings us to one of the most important defensive measures that we know of. One of 2 to be precise, and the first is the absolute removal of the Rings of Ein Soul Gone, as they represent the greatest weakness in the defense system of the Grey Tomb, because anyone wearing these rings can teleport to almost any place in the Grey Tomb, with very few exceptions. In other words, every trap and every opponent, whether be it Aura and Mare, the golems on the 6th floor, Gargantua slumbering at the bottom of a lake on the 4th floor, the icy fields of the 5th floor, or the burning, scorching inferno of the 7th floor, could be easily bypassed. And here is where it becomes especially critical. An enemy could even teleport behind Ein Soul Gone's main force on the 8th floor and directly attack the 9th floor. The throne room is one of the few places where one cannot teleport using the ring, but you can get right in front of it, so it poses an immense danger. In other words, it would be enough for someone with just a single stolen ring, perhaps someone like Auriel Omega, or the equivalent of Auriel of another raiding party or hostile guild, to teleport close to the throne room, and then use that position to teleport in their army waiting outside the Grey Tomb, very deep into Nazarick. And this could lead to a direct assault on the throne room, and in such scenario, one could only hope for a miracle, a world item usage, or rely on the Pleiades to buy time. And the second place where the ring cannot directly take you is to the innermost part of Nazarick's treasury. Now don't get me wrong, you need the Ring of Ein Soul Gone to teleport into the treasury vault itself, but even then you only end up in one of the many rooms, and you need an extra password to penetrate the innermost chamber, where Pandora's actor is already waiting for you. and this is where the world-class items, along with the rarest and most valuable weapons and equipment of the Great Tomb are stored. However, there's another security mechanic that is designed to counter this threat, and it has nothing to do with Pandora's Actor, even though you need a ring of Ein Soul Gone to enter the treasury vault. If you still have the ring equipped or just in your inventory, the Avataras, the 40 avatars of the fallen players of Ein Soul Gone, those who disappeared, who left the guild, will immediately attack the ring bearer. As mentioned, these avatars are replicas of Ein Soul Gone's friends, and are all very powerful, especially since they are equipped with the high-tier gear of Nazarick's players. Therefore, everyone, whether it be Mare, Albedo, or even Ainz himself, must always remove the ring of Ein Soul Gone to ensure that no one can take the ring outside, where it could be stolen or simply lost. In other words, they have learned from Sauron's mistake. And the second security measure that Nazarick has implemented, which is of major importance, in addition to giving up the ring, is that every single floor guardian must not only be equipped with a world-class item, to render the floor guardian in question immune to other world-class items and to wild magic, but also they are required to have an escort of at least 5 strong NPCs, meaning over the level of 70. And this is so that in the event of a mind control, the guardian can either be overpowered and brought back to Nazarick, or dealt with on the spot and be eliminated, which would in turn break the mind control once they are revived. Alternatively, and this is arguably the best option in this situation, one could go on the offensive to prevent world items like Downfall of Castle and Country or other similar items from being used at all. For example, in the event of Mare's travel in Volume 8, the Overlords of the Forbidden Library of Ashurbanipal would escort him, and in the event of an attack, would position themselves in front of Mare. Then one of them will be mind-controlled, but could still be restrained or defeated by the other overlords around, while Mare and another overlord can go on the counter-attack. And the goal would be both to steal the world item and, ideally, to eliminate or at least capture its owner, as well as to immediately sound the alarm bells and teleport in all available forces to the point of this attack. Something Shelty was unable to do because she attacked the Black Scripture alone. And this mistake was not to be repeated. And being attacked outside of Nazarick, however, presents the greater danger, which is why it is so important that these security protocols are used and applied. Nevertheless, there is still the possibility that smaller or weaker troops, like Death Knights or Elder Liches, could be attacked or even mind-controlled. But even these will not typically be alone, and will sound the alarm as soon as they can. And Demiurge has also spoken about establishing a spy network, so instead of just defending against a shadowy threat that is posed by, for example, Riku Aganea, they could go on the offensive and act preemptively by launching a preemptive strike or infiltrating hostile organizations outright before they can become dangerous or acquire the necessary resources to launch a major attack. And aside from these measures, there are also a few minor changes. For example, Shizo Delta's memory of Nazarick was altered by Ein Soul Gone to confuse eventual enemies in the event of a hostile capture and feed them false information. Furthermore, the view of the Great Tomb itself is obscured by a series of hills that Mare has created. And inside one of these hollowed-out hills lies Nazarick, making it safe from reconnaissance units operating from the ground. Additionally, there is a fake entrance to Nazarick, which, thanks to Aureol's teleportation network, actually functions as a real entrance, but it can be turned on and off at will. And these two security measures are mostly directed against the New World itself, but can be easily bypassed by a very experienced enemy or a hostile guild with sufficient planning and a bit of smarts. But again, as long as the rings are not stolen and as long as no other floor guardian is mind-controlled, they won't make it very far, even if they discover the actual entrance of the Great Tomb. And this is basically the security concept of Nazarick. And of course, finally, every attack on Nazarick will lead to brutal retaliation, as an Einzelgon will hunt you down, follow you to the end of the world, and will mobilize his entire army for retribution for an attack on a single floor guardian, as seen as with the attack on Sheltier, meaning the theocracy is most likely toast. So basically it is a case of hurt the dogmate and get your cock flayed. Which seems like a joke, but is like 99% canon in respect to Demiurge's Happy Farm. And with that said, now it's your turn. What do you think about the various ways Nazarick and the NPCs will defend themselves in the case that they are being attacked? Let me know it down in the comment section. And with that said, please check out my German channel, my fantasy channel, and if you don't want to listen to my voice or accent, but are still interested in the things I have to say, I have made an AI channel, where I use AI voice covers for my videos. And these channels are all linked down in the video description. Also please check out my Patreon if you want to support me beyond just leaving a like or sub. And with that said, now it's your turn. Thank you very much for watching, thanks to my Patreons, and thanks for supporting this channel. And special thanks to Ada Daddy Ada, ASK, Bad Guy Ye, Bad Burrito 316, Bezer, Ben C, Brandon D, Chrissy, Crowley 0221, Sia, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dong, Dan Pep, Dragonlord Placido Saxophone, Duckwagon, Dunkler Krieger, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Feral Shivan, Guy with That Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kyle R, Lee K. Long, Legendarius, Lelouch V. Britannia with a Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Lofrazer, Merovec, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Nope, Oh Hell No, Normal Toad, O'Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pantum, Personage, Ruru, Primus 11, Rhinomere, Cune Caracos P, Shergox's Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Sir Axolotl, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Supreme Cheese, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, The Orc Warboss, Rock Ed Smasher, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito 27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, Zinukai, and Sonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon on my next video.